The whispers started the moment. Helena Graves stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Deadwood, South Dakota. Her silk traveling dress already wilting under the harsh July sun of 1876. "That little thing will be dead within a week," muttered old Pete Hansen to his companion at the livery stable, neither man bothering to lower his voice. Helena heard every word as she stood on the wooden sidewalk, her single worn trunk at her feet, clutching the letter that had brought her halfway across the country. The letter from her uncle, Thomas Graves, offering her refuge after her parents' deaths in Philadelphia, had left her penniless and alone. She had nowhere else to go, no other family to turn to, and the prospect of working in a factory or worse had driven her westward to this wild frontier town carved into the Black Hills. She was 20 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with dark auburn hair that caught the light like burnished copper and a frame so slight that the wind seemed capable of carrying her away. Her face was pale from the long journey, her hands small and delicate, unmarked by labor. Everything about her appearance screamed fragility, refinement, Eastern softness. The men watching her arrival saw a porcelain doll that would shatter at the first real challenge, and they dismissed her accordingly. Helena lifted her chin and surveyed the muddy Main Street with its false-fronted buildings and rough-hewn character. This was to be her new home, and she would make the best of it, regardless of what these strangers thought. She had survived the grief of losing both parents to typhoid within days of each other, had sold everything she owned to pay their debts, and had traveled alone across half a continent with nothing but determination and $10 sewn into her petticoat. She was stronger than she looked, though she had no way to prove it yet. "Miss Graves." A voice cut through her thoughts, and Helena turned to find a lanky young man approaching, his hat in his hands. He could not have been more than 19, with sandy hair and a face full of freckles. "I am Billy Cooper, one of your uncle's ranch hands. He sent me to fetch you." "Thank you, Mr. Cooper." Helena managed a small smile despite her exhaustion. "I appreciate you making the trip into town." Billy loaded her trunk onto the wagon with ease, then helped Helena up onto the bench seat. As they rolled out of Deadwood and into the surrounding hills, he kept up a steady stream of nervous chatter, clearly uncomfortable with the responsibility of escorting a lady. Helena learned that her uncle's ranch, the Triple G, lay about 12 miles north of town, that it ran primarily cattle with some horses, and that Thomas Graves was respected as a fair but demanding boss. "He is a good man, your uncle," Billy said earnestly. "But Miss Graves, I should tell you straight that ranch life is hard. The work never stops and the land does not care who you are or where you came from. It will test you something fierce." "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Cooper." Helena gazed at the rolling hills covered in pine and grassland, so different from the brick and cobblestone of Philadelphia. "I do not expect comfort or ease. I only want a place to belong and work to occupy my hands." Billy looked doubtful but said nothing more. They rode in companionable silence for the rest of the journey, the wagon creaking over the rough trail as the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. Helena felt sweat trickle down her back beneath her corset and layers of proper clothing, but she refused to complain. This heat was nothing compared to the cold uncertainty she had left behind. The Triple G ranch came into view as they crested a ridge, sprawling across a broad valley with a creek running through it. The main house was a low structure of weathered wood with a covered porch, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. Cattle dotted the distant pastures like brown and white spots against the golden grass. It was rough and rustic, but something in Helena's chest loosened at the sight of it. Space, freedom, possibility. Her Uncle Thomas emerged from the house as the wagon pulled up, and Helena felt a surge of emotion at seeing him. He looked older than she remembered from his single visit to Philadelphia when she was a child, his hair now completely gray, his face weathered and lined. But his eyes were kind as he helped her down from the wagon, and his embrace was warm and genuine. "Helena, my dear girl, I am so sorry about your parents. William was a good brother, and Martha was a fine woman. You are welcome here for as long as you wish to stay." His voice was gruff with feeling, and Helena found tears prickling her eyes. "Thank you, Uncle Thomas. I promise I will not be a burden. I want to help however I can." Thomas pulled back and studied her face, his expression turning serious. "Helena, you need to understand what you are getting into. This is not Philadelphia. We do not have servants or fancy conveniences. Everyone works here, myself included. The days are long and the labor is hard. I will not coddle you or give you special treatment just because you are my niece and a city girl." "I would not want you to," Helena said firmly. "I came here to make a new life, not to hide from reality. Put me to work, Uncle Thomas. I will prove my worth." Her uncle looked skeptical but nodded slowly. "We will start you with lighter duties. Helping with meals, tending the vegetable garden, mending clothes. We will see how you manage." Helena wanted to protest that she could do more, but she bit her tongue. She would show them through action, not words. Billy carried her trunk inside while Thomas showed her to a small room at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair, but it was clean and the window looked out over the creek. Helena had never been so grateful for anything in her life. That evening, she met the rest of the ranch hands at supper. Besides Billy, there were 5 other men who worked the Triple G. Old Pete Hansen from the livery turned out to be the cook and general handyman, a grizzled veteran of the frontier with a permanent squint and a skeptical disposition. The other 4 were working cowboys who spent their days riding the range, tending cattle, and maintaining fences and buildings. The one who caught Helena's attention immediately was Jackson Zoo, the foreman. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen in Philadelphia, a striking figure who commanded attention without seeming to try. His father had been Chinese, one of the thousands who came to work the railroads and stayed to make their fortunes, and his mother was a woman from a local Dakota band. Jackson carried features from both parents, with straight black hair that fell to his shoulders, high cheekbones, and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything with quiet intensity. He was tall and lean, with the easy grace of someone who spent his life in the saddle. Helena guessed he was perhaps 25 or 26, and there was a self-possession about him that suggested he had earned his position through competence rather than charm. When Thomas introduced her, Jackson simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "Miss Graves." His voice was low and measured, giving nothing away. He did not tell her she would struggle, did not offer false encouragement, did not seem to have any opinion about her at all. Somehow, his neutrality was more unsettling than the open doubt of the others. The other 3 cowboys were more typical of the men Helena had seen in Deadwood. There was Frank Miller, stocky and loud, who made jokes at her expense throughout the meal. Sam Daniels, quiet and serious, who barely looked at her. And young Tom Raid, barely 18, who blushed furiously every time she spoke to him. They were rough men, hardened by years of demanding work, and they clearly viewed her as an interloper who would soon realize her mistake and flee back east. Helena lay in bed that first night listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the house settling, the whisper of wind through the pines. She was exhausted but too keyed up to sleep, her mind racing with doubts and determination in equal measure. Everyone expected her to fail. Part of her wondered if they were right. But a deeper part, the part that had kept her standing through her parents' deaths and the loss of everything familiar, refused to accept defeat before she had even begun. She would show them. Somehow, she would prove that she belonged here. The next morning, Helena woke before dawn to help old Pete prepare breakfast for the men. He grudgingly allowed her to slice bacon and mix biscuit dough, watching her with suspicious eyes as if expecting her to faint at any moment. But Helena had helped her mother in the kitchen many times, and though the cast iron stove and simple ingredients were different from what she was used to, the basic principles remained the same. She worked steadily and competently, and by the time the men came in from their morning chores, breakfast was ready. Jackson Zoo was the last to enter, wiping his hands on his trousers. He paused in the doorway, his eyes moving from the table laden with food to Helena standing by the stove, then to Pete's surprised expression. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read, before he took his seat without comment. After breakfast, Thomas set Helena to work in the vegetable garden behind the house. It was a large plot, somewhat overgrown with weeds, growing potatoes, beans, squash, and other staples. Helena had never gardened before, but she approached it logically, pulling weeds and loosening soil around the plants as common sense dictated. The work was harder than she expected, requiring her to kneel in the dirt and use muscles she had never particularly engaged before. Her hands blistered within the first hour. She refused to stop or complain. When Billy passed by mid-morning and offered to help, she politely declined. When her uncle checked on her at noon and suggested she rest, she thanked him but said she wanted to finish the section she had started. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, she had cleared half the garden of weeds and was filthy, sweaty, and aching in every limb. But there was a satisfaction in the work, in seeing the tangible results of her labor, that she had never experienced in her carefully structured life back east. Jackson Zoo found her there as dusk fell, still working by the fading light. He stood watching her for a long moment before speaking. "Supper will be ready soon." Helena sat back on her heels and pushed a strand of hair from her face with the back of her hand, likely leaving a streak of dirt. "I just want to finish this row. The garden will still be here tomorrow, I know, but I want to finish what I started today." She met his eyes directly, expecting argument or mockery. But Jackson only studied her for another moment, his expression thoughtful, before he nodded and walked away. That night, Helena soaked her blistered hands in cool water and tried not to wince as she helped serve dinner. Thomas looked concerned, but she smiled and assured him she was fine. She caught Jackson watching her once, his dark eyes unreadable, but when she met his gaze, he looked away and said nothing. The days that followed established a pattern. Helena worked in the garden, helped with cooking and cleaning, mended clothes and linens. She tackled every task with fierce determination, ignoring her aching muscles and blistered hands. Old Pete slowly warmed to her as she proved herself capable and willing to learn. Her uncle stopped hovering quite so much. The other cowboys remained distant but no longer actively dismissive. Only Jackson remained an enigma, quiet and watchful, never criticizing but never praising either. 2 weeks after her arrival, Helena finished weeding the entire garden and set about improving it. She noticed that water was being carried from the creek in buckets, an inefficient and exhausting process. She asked Billy to help her dig a channel to redirect a small stream closer to the garden, then used boards from a collapsed fence to create a simple irrigation system. It took 3 days of backbreaking work, but when she was done, water flowed steadily to the plants with minimal effort required to distribute it. She was standing back, admiring her handiwork and nursing her aching back, when Jackson appeared beside her. She had not heard him approach, and she jumped slightly. He looked at the irrigation channel, following its path from the creek to the garden, taking in the careful grading and the wooden sluices she had built. "Where did you learn to do this?" His tone was curious rather than accusatory. "I did not. I simply observed that carrying water was inefficient and thought about how to solve the problem. My father was an engineer. I suppose I inherited some of his practical thinking." Helena wiped sweat from her forehead. "Is it wrong? Should I not have done it without asking permission first?" "No, it is good work, smart." Jackson crouched down to examine one of the sluices more closely. "You built this yourself." Billy helped dig the channel. "But yes, I designed and built the system." Helena felt a small glow of pride at his approval, though she tried not to show it. "Does it offend you that a woman did this?" Jackson looked up at her, and for the first time she saw something that might have been amusement in his eyes. "Why would it offend me? Good work is good work, regardless of who does it. I am just surprised. Most people who come from the city cannot think beyond the methods they already know. I have discovered that survival requires adaptation." Helena found herself relaxing slightly. This was the most Jackson had spoken to her since her arrival. "Besides, I grew tired of watching everyone carry water buckets when there was a simpler solution." Jackson stood, his eyes still on the irrigation system. "Your uncle was worried you would not last a week here. He thought the work would break you, or that you would decide ranch life was beneath you." "And what did you think?" Helena surprised herself with the boldness of the question. Jackson met her gaze directly, his expression serious. "I thought it was not my place to have an opinion. People prove who they are through their actions, not through other people's expectations." He paused, then added, "But I will say you have surprised me, Miss Graves. You are stronger than you look." It was the closest thing to a compliment she had received since arriving, and Helena felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Zhu. That means more than you might think." He nodded once, then walked away, leaving Helena to wonder about the man behind the quiet exterior. Jackson Zhu was clearly respected by the other ranch hands and trusted completely by her uncle. He worked harder than any two men combined, up before dawn, and often still working after dark. She had seen him break horses with patient persistence, doctor sick cattle with gentle hands, and handle conflicts between the cowboys with firm fairness. He was competent in ways that seemed almost superhuman, yet he never drew attention to himself or demanded recognition. As the weeks passed and July melted into August, Helena continued to expand her role on the ranch. She had proven herself with lighter duties, and now she wanted more. When Thomas suggested she might enjoy some leisure time, perhaps reading or needlework, she instead asked to learn how to work with the horses. Her uncle looked uncomfortable, glancing at Jackson, who had been checking tack nearby and had overheard the conversation. "That is not women's work, Helena," Thomas said gently. "It is dangerous. These are not tame carriage horses from Philadelphia." "Then teach me how to handle ranch horses," Helena replied evenly. "Uncle Thomas, I appreciate your concern, but I did not come here to sit on the porch with embroidery. I want to be useful. I want to contribute meaningfully to the ranch." Thomas still looked doubtful, and Helena felt frustration rise in her throat. Before she could argue further, Jackson spoke from where he stood by the barn. "If Miss Graves wants to learn, I can teach her. She has earned the right to try." Both Helena and Thomas turned to look at him in surprise. Jackson met their gazes calmly, his expression neutral. "She has proven herself willing to work hard and learn new skills. If she wants to expand her abilities, she should have that opportunity. I will make sure she stays safe." Thomas considered this, then slowly nodded. Very well. But Jackson, if she gets hurt or if it becomes too much, I am holding you responsible. Understood? Jackson turned to Helena. We start tomorrow morning after breakfast. Wear the plainest, sturdiest clothes you have, and prepare for a lot of falling down. Helena felt a surge of gratitude and excitement that almost made her dizzy. Thank you, Mr. Zhu. I promise I will work hard and follow your instructions. I expect nothing less. There might have been the ghost of a smile around his mouth, but it vanished before she could be certain. The next morning, Helena appeared in a simple cotton dress that had seen better days, her hair braided tightly and pinned close to her head. Jackson was waiting by the corral, along with a rangy bay mare who eyed Helena with what seemed like deep suspicion. This is Sage, Jackson introduced the horse. She is calm and patient, which makes her ideal for beginners. But she is still a horse, which means she is stronger than you and has her own mind. You have to earn her respect and cooperation. You cannot force it. What followed were some of the most challenging and enlightening weeks of Helena's life. Jackson was a patient but exacting teacher, explaining everything clearly and demonstrating before he asked her to try. He taught her how to approach a horse properly, how to read their body language, how to groom and tack them with confidence and care. He showed her how to sit properly in the saddle, how to use her weight and legs more than the reins, how to communicate through subtle cues rather than force. Helena fell off more times than she could count in those first days. The ground was hard and unforgiving, and she collected bruises like flowers in a garden. But she got back on every single time, refusing to let fear or pain stop her. Jackson never mocked her failures or seemed impatient with her slow progress. He simply helped her up, explained what had gone wrong, and told her to try again. The other cowboys began to take notice. Frank Miller made jokes about city girls playing cowboy, but there was less bite in his words than before. Sam Daniels stopped one afternoon to watch her successfully complete a series of figure eights in the corral and gave her an approving nod. Young Tom Reed openly admired her determination, though he was too shy to say much beyond awkward compliments. But it was Jackson whose opinion mattered most to Helena, though she was not entirely sure why. Perhaps it was because he had given her this chance when her own uncle had doubted. Perhaps it was because he treated her as someone capable of learning rather than a fragile thing to be protected. Or perhaps it was something deeper, something in the way her pulse quickened when he placed his hands on her waist to adjust her position in the saddle, or the way she found herself watching him work with the horses, admiring the fluid grace of his movements and the quiet authority in his voice. One evening in late August, after a long day of riding practice, Jackson called a halt and led Sage toward the barn. Helena followed, tired but satisfied with her progress. As they unsaddled the horse together, working in comfortable silence, Jackson suddenly spoke. "You have done well, Miss Graves. You have a natural feel for horses. They trust you." Helena paused in brushing Sage's coat, surprised and pleased. "Thank you. I had an excellent teacher." "A teacher can only guide. The student has to do the work, and you have worked harder than most men I have trained." Jackson was checking Sage's hooves, his back to Helena, which somehow made the praise feel more genuine. "Your uncle thought you would be gone by now. Everyone did. They called you too frail for ranch life." "I know, I heard them." Helena resumed brushing, her strokes long and steady. "Do you still think I am too frail?" Jackson set down Sage's hoof and straightened, turning to look at Helena directly. In the dim light of the barn, with dust motes floating in the slanting sunbeams, his face was half in shadow. "No. I think you are one of the strongest people I have met. Strength is not about how much you can lift or how long you can work without rest." It is about facing challenges that terrify you and refusing to give up. You have that kind of strength. Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with exertion. That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me since I arrived here. Perhaps the kindest thing anyone has said to me ever. It is not kindness, it is observation. Jackson held her gaze for a moment longer, and Helena felt something shift in the air between them, a current of awareness that made her breath catch. Then he looked away, gathering up the tack. "Come on. We should get this equipment cleaned before supper." But as they worked side by side in the tack room, Helena could not stop thinking about his words or the look in his eyes. She had come to the Triple G expecting nothing more than shelter and survival. She had not expected to find purpose, or satisfaction, or this strange, growing connection to a man who seemed to see her more clearly than anyone else ever had. September brought cooler weather and new challenges. The cattle needed to be moved to winter pastures, which required all hands working long days in the saddle. Thomas was reluctant to send Helena on the drive, but Jackson pointed out that she now rode as well as young Tom and better than old Pete. After some debate, it was decided that Helena would participate, though she would stay with the main herd rather than chase strays in rough country. The morning of the drive, Helena rose in the pre-dawn darkness and dressed in borrowed men's trousers, a loose shirt, and a battered hat that had belonged to a cowboy who left years ago. When she emerged from her room, old Pete did a double take, then laughed and said she looked like a proper ranch hand now. Thomas still seemed worried, but Jackson simply nodded approval and handed her the reins to Sage. The drive took 3 days of hard riding through varying terrain, guiding hundreds of cattle toward better grazing land before winter set in. Helena discovered muscles she did not know she had, aching in places she could not have previously named. The work required constant attention, quick reactions, and endurance she had to dig deep to find. But there was also a wild joy in it, the thunder of hooves, the vast sky overhead, the sense of being part of something larger than herself. She watched Jackson work throughout those days, and she began to understand why he was foreman. He seemed to be everywhere at once, anticipating problems before they developed, directing the other cowboys with economical gestures and few words. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, moving as one with the animal beneath him. When a steer broke from the herd and headed for rough country, Jackson went after it without hesitation, disappearing into a tangle of rocks and brush, and emerging minutes later with the steer trotting docilely ahead of him. On the second night they camped under the stars, the cattle settled and the fire burning low. Helena sat wrapped in a blanket, too tired to sleep yet, watching the flames dance. Jackson materialized out of the darkness and sat down nearby, close enough for conversation but maintaining a respectful distance. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "I am exhausted and every part of my body hurts, but I would not trade this experience for anything." Helena smiled at him across the fire. "Thank you for advocating for me to come on this drive. I know my uncle would not have allowed it without your support. You earned your place here." Jackson poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward into the night. "Can I ask you something, Miss Graves?" "Of course. And please call me Helena. Miss Graves sounds far too formal given that we have been working together for months now." "Helena, then, and you should call me Jackson." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Why are you doing this? You could have stayed in the house doing lighter work. Your uncle would have supported you. You did not have to push yourself this hard." Helena considered the question, staring into the fire. "When my parents died, I felt like I was drowning. Everything I knew was gone, my entire life pulled out from under me. I had no control over anything. Coming here was not really a choice, it was survival. But how I lived here, what I made of myself, that was something I could control. She looked up at Jackson. I suppose I am doing this to prove to myself that I am not helpless or useless, that I can adapt and grow and become someone different from who I was raised to be. Jackson nodded slowly, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. I understand that. When I was younger, people looked at me and saw only that I was half Chinese, half Dakota, not fully belonging to either world. They assumed I was good for hard labor but nothing more. I had to prove, over and over, that I was competent and trustworthy, that I could lead, not just follow. That must have been incredibly difficult. Helena felt a surge of empathy. Do people still judge you for your heritage? Some do. Others have learned to look past it. Your uncle hired me as foreman 5 years ago because I was the best person for the job, not despite my background. That meant a great deal. Jackson's expression softened slightly. But I will not lie and say it has been easy. Being different in any way makes you a target for people's prejudices and fears. I am sorry you have had to face that. Helena shifted her blanket closer, driven by an impulse to comfort him. For what it is worth, I think you are an exceptional foreman. The men respect you, the horses trust you, and this ranch runs smoothly because of your competence. You have earned everything you have. As have you. Jackson's voice was warm, and when Helena met his eyes, she saw something in them that made her heart beat faster. Helena, I want you to know that watching you these past months has been remarkable. You arrived looking like a strong wind could blow you away, and everyone assumed you would break under the weight of ranch life. Instead, you have outworked every hand here. You never complain, never make excuses, never ask for special treatment. You just quietly do whatever needs to be done, better than anyone expects. Helena felt tears prick her eyes at his words, emotion welling up from some deep place in her chest. You see me, she whispered. You really see me, not some fragile city girl or a burden to be tolerated. You see who I am trying to become. I see who you already are. Jackson reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were calloused and warm against her skin. You are strong and capable and determined. You are also kind and thoughtful and brave in ways that have nothing to do with riding horses or driving cattle. You are remarkable, Helena Graves. The distance between them seemed to shrink, though neither of them moved. Helena could feel the warmth radiating from Jackson's body, could see the pulse beating in his throat. Her own heart was hammering so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. The night around them felt alive with possibility, with the weight of everything unspoken passing between them in glances and caught breaths. Jackson, Helena began, not entirely sure what she was going to say, only knowing that something fundamental was shifting between them, and she needed to acknowledge it. But before she could continue, Frank Miller's loud voice shattered the moment, calling from across camp that he was starting the next watch. Jackson pulled back slightly, the spell broken, though his eyes lingered on Helena's face with unmistakable longing. You should get some rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow will be another long day. Yes, you are right. Helena fought disappointment, but she also felt a glow of warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Jackson cared for her. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the careful tenderness of his touch. The knowledge settled into her chest like a candle flame, steady and bright. As she lay wrapped in her blanket under the vast expanse of stars, Helena acknowledged to herself what she had been feeling for weeks now. She was falling in love with Jackson Zhu. Perhaps she had been falling from the moment he first gave her a chance when everyone else expected her to fail. Or perhaps it had happened gradually, Through countless small moments of working side by side, learning from him, being truly seen and valued for who she was, it terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. She had never felt this way before, had never experienced this combination of friendship and attraction, respect and longing. Her upbringing in Philadelphia had taught her that love was about suitable matches and social position, carefully orchestrated meetings and proper courtship rituals. But this, what she felt for Jackson, was nothing like that. It was raw and real and completely outside any rules she had been taught. She did not know if he felt the same way, though tonight suggested he might. And she did not know if anything could ever come of these feelings, given the harsh realities of the world they lived in. A half-Chinese, half-Lakota foreman and the niece of the ranch owner, both of them outsiders in different ways. The thought of the judgments they would face made her stomach clench with anxiety. But beneath the fear was something stronger. A certainty that Jackson was worth fighting for, that what they were building between them mattered more than other people's prejudices. If she had learned anything in her months on the Triple G, it was that she was stronger than she looked, more capable than anyone expected. If she could survive the death of her parents and the loss of everything familiar, if she could learn to work a ranch and win the respect of hardened cowboys, then surely she could face whatever challenges loving Jackson Zoo might bring. The drive concluded successfully, and they returned to the ranch tired but satisfied. Helena had proven beyond any doubt that she belonged on the Triple G, that she could handle the demands of ranch life. Thomas pulled her aside that evening and told her, with obvious pride, that he was glad she had come, and that she had made a place for herself through sheer determination and character. "You are welcome here as long as you wish to stay," he said, his eyes suspiciously bright. "This is your home now, Helena. You have earned that." Helena hugged him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and belonging that she had not experienced since her parents' deaths. She had found a home and a purpose. She had proven herself. And she had found something else too, something precious and unexpected in the form of the quiet foreman with dark eyes that saw straight through to her soul. As autumn deepened into October, the work on the ranch shifted to preparing for winter. There was firewood to split and stack, buildings to repair and reinforce, supplies to lay in. Helena threw herself into all of it, working alongside the men without complaint. She noticed that Jackson often positioned himself near her during tasks, not hovering or protecting, but simply present. They fell into an easy partnership, anticipating each other's movements, communicating as much through glances as words. The other cowboys noticed too. Tom Reed made a comment one afternoon about how well the foreman and Miss Graves worked together, and Frank Miller laughed and said maybe Jackson had finally found someone worth settling down for. Sam Daniels told them both to mind their own business, but there was a knowing look in his eyes. Helena was hyper-aware of Jackson's presence now, of every accidental brush of hands, every moment their eyes met across the yard. The tension between them had been building for weeks, a sweet anticipation that made her breath catch at unexpected moments. But Jackson maintained careful propriety, never crossing the line into impropriety, always conscious of her reputation and his position. It was Helena who finally took the leap, driven by impatience and a growing certainty that life was too short and uncertain to waste on proper conventions. One evening in mid-October, she found Jackson in the barn after supper, checking on a mare who was close to foaling. The sun had set and the barn was lit by a single lantern, casting warm golden light and deep shadows. "How is she?" Helena asked softly, not wanting to startle the horse. "Restless." "I think tonight might be the night." Jackson ran a soothing hand down the mare's neck, I will probably stay out here to keep watch. Would you like company? Helena moved closer into the circle of lamplight. Jackson looked at her, his expression careful. Helena, people will talk if you spend the evening alone with me in the barn. Let them talk. I am tired of caring what people think. Helena met his gaze steadily. Jackson, we need to discuss what is happening between us. I know you feel it too. For a long moment, Jackson was silent, his eyes searching her face. Then he seemed to come to a decision, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Yes, I feel it. I have been trying to maintain appropriate distance, but Helena, you make that impossible. When I am near you, all I can think about is how much I want to be closer. When I am away from you, I find excuses to seek you out. You have become essential to me in ways that both terrify me and make me happier than I have ever been. Helena's heart soared at his words, relief and joy flooding through her. I feel the same way. I think I have been falling in love with you since you first gave me a chance to prove myself. You see me as I truly am, not as some delicate thing to be protected. You treat me as an equal while still making me feel cherished. I have never known anyone like you, Jackson, and I do not want to pretend these feelings do not exist just because they might complicate things. They will complicate things, Jackson said quietly, but he was moving toward her, drawn as if by invisible threads. People will judge us, both of us. They will say you are too good for a half-breed foreman, that I am taking advantage of my position. Your uncle may be uncomfortable, may worry about what people think of his family. Then we will face those challenges together. Helena closed the remaining distance between them, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. I am not fragile, Jackson. I am strong enough to stand beside you and weather whatever storms may come. If you want me, if you care for me as I care for you, then nothing else matters. Jackson's control finally broke. He pulled her against him and kissed her with a fierce tenderness that stole her breath. Helena melted into him, winding her arms around his neck, pouring months of longing and frustration and love into the kiss. He tasted of coffee and night air, and his arms around her felt like the safest place she had ever been. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Helena Graves. I have loved you for longer than I care to admit, fought against it because I thought I had no right to want you. But I cannot fight it anymore. You have become everything to me. I love you too. Helena felt tears of happiness on her cheeks. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. I promise you that. They spent the evening in the barn, talking in low voices between checking on the mare, sharing the stories of their lives and dreams for the future. Jackson told her about growing up caught between two worlds, about the casual cruelties he had faced, and how he had learned to build his own place through sheer competence and determination. Helena shared her memories of Philadelphia, of parents she had loved deeply, of the suffocating expectations for young women and her secret dreams of something more meaningful. The mare foaled just after midnight, a healthy colt who wobbled to his feet within minutes. Jackson and Helena worked together to help clean him and ensure the mare was recovering well, their partnership as natural as breathing. When the crisis had passed and both horses were settled, Jackson pulled Helena into his arms again and kissed her with a tenderness that made her ache. I should walk you back to the house, he murmured against her hair. It is late and people will notice if you are gone all night. I know, you are right. Helena pulled back reluctantly, already missing his warmth. But Jackson, we need to tell my uncle about us. I will not hide how I feel or sneak around like we are doing something wrong. What we have is good and right, and I want to be open about it. Jackson looked uncertain, worry creasing his brow. Helena, I do not want to put you in a difficult position with your only family. If Thomas objects, if he asks me to leave the ranch, I will go rather than cause a rift between you. He will not ask you to leave. My uncle is a fair man. He values you and respects your work, and he wants me to be happy." Helena spoke with more confidence than she felt, but she refused to let fear dictate her choices. "We will talk to him together tomorrow. We will be honest about our feelings and our intentions. It will be all right, I promise." They walked back to the house hand in hand, parting at the porch with one more lingering kiss. Helena floated to her room on a cloud of joy and trepidation, barely able to believe that Jackson loved her, that he wanted a future with her. She had come to the Triple G expecting nothing more than survival, and instead she had found love with a man who was her equal in every way that mattered. Sleep was elusive, her mind too full of hope and plans, and the memory of Jackson's kiss. When she finally drifted off as dawn approached, she dreamed of a future where they worked the ranch side by side, building something lasting together. The conversation with Thomas the next day was one of the most difficult of Helena's life. She and Jackson approached him together after breakfast, and the confusion on her uncle's face when they asked to speak privately quickly shifted to understanding, and then concern as they explained their relationship. Thomas listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving from Helena to Jackson and back again. Helena held her breath, her hand finding Jackson's beneath the table and gripping tightly. "I cannot say I am entirely surprised," Thomas finally said. "I have seen how you two are together, the way you work so well as a team, and I have seen how happy Helena has been these past months." He looked at Jackson seriously. "You are the best foreman I have ever had, Jackson, and I trust you completely with the work. But this is my niece we are talking about, my brother's only child. I have to know your intentions are honorable." "They are, sir." Jackson's voice was steady and respectful. "I love Helena and I want to marry her if she will have me. I know I am not what most people would consider a suitable match. I have no family name, no wealth beyond what I earn with my work. I am a man of mixed heritage in a world that often judges that harshly. But I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making Helena happy and keeping her safe. I will work myself to the bone to provide for her and build a good life. She is the most remarkable person I have ever known, and I consider it the greatest honor of my life that she loves me." Thomas studied Jackson for a long moment, then turned to Helena. "And you, niece? You are certain about this? You understand the challenges you may face, the judgments people will make?" "I am certain, Uncle Thomas." Helena's voice rang with conviction. "I love Jackson and I choose him freely, with full awareness of what we may encounter. I am not the same fragile girl who arrived here in July. I have learned that I am strong enough to face difficulties, to stand up for what matters. Jackson matters. What we have together matters. I will not let fear or prejudice dictate my happiness." A slow smile spread across Thomas's weathered face, softening his features. "You sound just like your mother when she decided to marry your father against her family's wishes. She was a Boston girl who fell for a Philadelphia engineer with more ambition than money, and her family was scandalized. But she followed her heart, and they were happy together until the end." He reached across the table to grasp both their hands. "I give you my blessing, both of you. Jackson, you are a fine man, and I could not ask for a better match for my niece. Helena, I am proud of the woman you have become. Your parents would be proud too." Relief washed over Helena so powerfully she felt dizzy. She blinked back tears as Thomas stood and pulled them both into an awkward but heartfelt embrace. "We will have to figure out the practicalities," he continued. "But for now, I want you both to know that you have my full support. This is Helena's home, and Jackson, it is yours too for as long as you wish it to be." The news spread through the ranch with predictable speed. Old Pete was delighted, declaring that he had known from the start that Miss Helena was special and that Jackson deserved someone who could match his work ethic. Young Tom Reed was openly happy for them, though he blushed when he stammered out his congratulations. Sam Daniels simply nodded approval and said it was about time they stopped dancing around each other. Frank Miller was more complicated, making a few comments about people knowing their place that had Sam threatening to knock his teeth in. Jackson handled it with his usual calm, simply stating that Helena had chosen him, and that was the end of it. Eventually, even Frank seemed to accept the situation, grumbling but causing no real trouble. The bigger challenge came from the town of Deadwood and the wider community. When Helena and Jackson rode into town together the following week for supplies, she felt the weight of stares and whispers. Several women Helena had met briefly at church looked at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disapproval. A man made a crude comment as they passed, something about Helena preferring a half-breed to a proper white man. Jackson's hand tightened on the reins, his jaw clenching, but he said nothing and kept walking. Helena, however, stopped dead and turned to face the man. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady and cold. "Jackson Zoo is worth 10 of you, sir. He is intelligent, hardworking, honorable, and kind. He treats me with respect and sees me as an equal. If that makes him unsuitable in your eyes, then the fault lies with your judgment, not with him. Good day." She turned and took Jackson's arm, holding her head high as they continued down the street. She could feel him trembling slightly beside her, though whether from anger or emotion she could not tell. When they ducked into the general store, he pulled her aside between the shelves and kissed her fiercely. "Thank you," he whispered. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did. I will not let anyone speak ill of you, Jackson. You are mine and I am yours, and anyone who has a problem with that will have to answer to me." Helena cupped his face, her eyes fierce. "I meant what I said. I am strong enough to stand beside you to fight for us. I know you are. You are the strongest person I know." Jackson kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. "I love you so much, Helena. Sometimes I cannot believe you are real. I am very real, and I am not going anywhere." Helena smiled up at him, feeling that familiar rush of love and certainty. "Now come on, we have supplies to buy and a ranch to run. We can be romantic later." They completed their shopping and returned to the Triple G, secure in their commitment despite the judgments of others. Over the following weeks, they settled into their relationship openly, working together during the days and spending their evenings talking and planning for the future. Jackson proposed formally one night in November, presenting her with a simple gold band he had purchased with his savings. Helena accepted with tears of joy, and they set a date for a spring wedding. Winter arrived with a vengeance in December, bringing heavy snows and bitter cold. The work became harder, focused on keeping the animals fed and sheltered, maintaining essential operations despite the weather. Helena proved herself once again, working in conditions that would have defeated the woman she had been 6 months earlier. She helped break ice on water troughs, carried hay to snowbound cattle, and kept the household running smoothly while the men battled the elements. Jackson watched her with open admiration now, no longer hiding his feelings. He had told Thomas that he wanted to build a house for Helena on a piece of land near the main ranch, a place of their own to start their married life. Thomas had agreed enthusiastically and even donated materials from the ranch stores. As soon as the weather permitted in early spring, Jackson began construction with help from the other cowboys. Helena was involved in every decision, working alongside Jackson to build their home. It was a simple structure, just 3 rooms to start, but it was solid and well made. She planted a garden beside it, already imagining vegetables growing in the summer sun. Together they furnished it with basic pieces, some purchased and some made by Jackson's skilled hands. It was not grand by Philadelphia standards, but to Helena, it was perfect because they had created it together. Their wedding took place in late May of 1877, nearly a year after Helena's arrival in South Dakota. It was a simple ceremony held at the ranch, officiated by a traveling preacher who came through the territory. Thomas walked Helena down the makeshift aisle in her best dress, which she had altered and improved with lace from a petticoat. The wedding party consisted of the ranch hands and a few friends from neighboring spreads who knew and respected Jackson. There were no guests from Helena's former life in Philadelphia, no elaborate decorations or expensive festivities. But as Helena looked into Jackson's eyes and spoke her vows, she felt more joy than she had ever experienced. This man saw her truly, valued her completely, and loved her fiercely. They were equal partners, building a life based on mutual respect and shared dreams. It was everything she had never known she wanted. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Helena and Jackson ran their section of the Triple G together, earning a reputation throughout the territory for their excellent horses and well-managed cattle. Helena continued to surprise everyone with her capabilities, learning new skills and taking on increasing responsibilities. She became known as a woman who could do anything she set her mind to, who had arrived looking fragile but had proven herself tougher than most men. She and Jackson faced ongoing prejudice from some quarters, but they had strong allies in Thomas and the Triple G hands. They built a community of people who valued character over background, who judged based on actions rather than heritage. It was not perfect, but it was theirs. In the spring of 1878, Helena gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas William Zoo, after both their fathers. Helena had been terrified during the pregnancy, her only experience with childbirth being her mother's stories of danger and difficulty. But she labored with the same determination she brought to everything else, supported by Jackson's steady presence and old Pete's surprisingly knowledgeable assistance. When she finally held her son in her arms, exhausted and exhilarated, she looked up at Jackson and saw tears streaming down his face. "We made a person," she whispered in awe. "Look at him, Jackson. He is perfect. He is perfect because he is part of you." Jackson kissed her forehead gently, his voice thick with emotion. "You are amazing, Helena. You just did the hardest thing anyone can do, and you are already thinking about him instead of yourself." Little Thomas was a healthy, curious baby who grew quickly under his parents' devoted care. Helena learned to balance motherhood with her work on the ranch, often carrying the baby in a sling as she completed lighter tasks. Jackson was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, teaching him even as an infant about the horses and cattle that were their livelihood. 2 years later, Helena gave birth to a daughter they named Mary Rose, after Jackson's mother and Helena's mother respectively. She was a calm baby where Thomas had been fussy, content to watch the world with her father's dark, observant eyes. Jackson doted on her completely, his fierce foreman persona melting into tenderness whenever he held his daughter. As their children grew, Helena and Jackson taught them the values they had learned through their own struggles. They taught them that hard work and determination could overcome others' low expectations. They taught them that heritage was something to be proud of, not ashamed of, and that they carried the strength of multiple peoples in their blood. They taught them that judging people by their actions and character, rather than their appearance or background, was the only honorable way to live. Thomas Graves remained a vital part of their lives until his death in 1885 at the age of 72. He had lived to see his niece become one of the most respected ranchers in the territory, to see her children grow strong and happy, and to know that the Triple G would continue under Jackson and Helena's capable management. He died peacefully in his sleep, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had built with his own hands. Helena grieved deeply for the uncle who had given her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to go, who had allowed her to prove herself, and who had supported her love for Jackson without reservation. But she also felt profound gratitude for the years they had together, and the foundation he had helped her build. As the years passed, and Montana achieved statehood in 1889, Helena and Jackson's reputation continued to grow. The Triple G became known as one of the best-managed ranches in the region, a place where skill and hard work were valued above all else. They hired hands based on capability rather than background, creating a diverse crew that reflected Jackson's own mixed heritage and Helena's belief in judging people by their actions. Their children grew into capable adults. Thomas William became a veterinarian, studying at a university back east but returning to practice in the territory he loved. He inherited his mother's determination and his father's quiet competence, along with a gift for understanding animals that served him well. Mary Rose proved to have a head for business, eventually taking over much of the ranch's financial management and negotiating deals that expanded their operations significantly. In 1892, Helena and Jackson welcomed a third child somewhat unexpectedly, a son they named James. He arrived when Helena was 42, a surprise that had her worried at first, but which proved to be pure joy. James was energetic and adventurous, keeping his parents young with his endless questions and exploration. He adored his older siblings and followed them everywhere, learning from both their examples. As the new century approached, Helena sometimes looked back on the frightened, grieving girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Deadwood over 20 years earlier and marveled at how far she had come. She had arrived looking fragile, dismissed as too weak for ranch life. Instead, she had built a legacy of strength and capability, had raised a family and helped run a successful operation, and had found love with a man who was her perfect match. One evening in the summer of 1900, as they sat on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the sun set over the land they had worked side by side for decades, Jackson took Helena's hand and raised it to his lips. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying here, choosing this life. You could have gone back east, found an easier path." Helena looked at him, at the silver now threading through his black hair, the lines time and weather had etched into his face, the dark eyes that still saw straight through to her soul. She thought about their children, grown and thriving. She thought about the ranch that was their shared achievement. She thought about the life they had built through determination and love. "Never," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I was meant to be. With you, on this land, building something that matters. They said I was too frail for ranch life, but you watched me outwork every hand and you gave me the chance to prove them wrong. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You loved me when I barely knew how to love myself. How could I ever regret that? I am the one who got lucky," Jackson said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could have chosen anyone, Helena. You could have had someone from your own background, someone who would have made your life easier. Instead, you chose a half-breed foreman with nothing to offer but his love and his willingness to work hard. You had everything to offer. You still do." Helena leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, as familiar now as her own heartbeat. You gave me partnership and respect. You saw my strength when everyone else saw weakness. You loved me not despite who I am but because of it. That is worth more than any amount of money or social position." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear their youngest son laughing as he chased fireflies with the ranch dogs. The cattle were settled for the night, the horses safe in their pastures, the land at peace. Helena thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The grief and loss that had driven her west, the whispers and dismissals when she arrived, the backbreaking work that had transformed her. The first time Jackson had really looked at her, seeing beyond the surface. The countless days of working side by side, building trust and respect that had blossomed into love. The challenges they had faced together and overcome. The children they had raised and the legacy they were leaving. She had come to the Triple G with nothing but determination and a desperate need to survive. She had found purpose, belonging, love, and a life beyond anything she could have imagined in those dark days after her parents' deaths. She had proven that strength came in unexpected packages, that determination could overcome doubt, and that love could bridge any divide for those brave enough to fight for it. "I love you," she murmured to Jackson, the words as true now as the first time she had spoken them in the barn all those years ago. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. I love you too." Jackson kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Zoo, the absolute best thing." They sat together on the porch until the moon rose, surrounded by everything they had built through love and partnership and unwavering determination. The ranch that had seemed impossible to a fragile city girl was now her kingdom, and the quiet foreman who had given her a chance was her king. Together, they had created something lasting and true, proof that the strongest foundations were built not on appearances or expectations, but on seeing each other clearly and choosing to love anyway. Helena Graves had arrived in Deadwood looking too frail for ranch life, and Jackson Zoo had watched her outwork every hand on the Triple G. In the process, they had found each other, and together they had built a legacy that would endure for generations. Their love story was written in the land itself, in the cattle and horses they raised, in the children who carried their combined strength forward into the new century. It was a story of perseverance and partnership, of seeing beyond surfaces to the strength beneath, of love that conquered prejudice and expectation. And it was, in the end, exactly the life they were both meant to live.